Hi everyone, my name is Max Goldstein. We are here to help high schoolers who are taking biology and introducing you to ecosystems and help you as much as possible. Today our focus is going to be on food chains and energy pyramids.
First, we're going to talk about a food chain. A food chain shows the transfer of energy and nutrients from organism to organism as they consume their food. In this food chain, we begin with grass. The grass is eaten by the grasshopper, which is eaten by the frog, which is eaten by the python, which is eaten by the eagle, and then decomposed by fungi. We also have arrows going in the direction of energy flow. Make sure to know that the arrows show a transfer of energy from one organism to the next and are not representative of the organism on the left of the arrow eating the organism on the right. For example, the first arrow points from the grass to the grasshopper, showing energy flow from the grass to the grasshopper because the grasshopper ate the grass.
Now we are going to go over important definitions so that we can identify the types of organisms we have in our food chain. The first definition is a producer. A producer is also known as an autotroph. These are organisms that produce complex organic compounds from simple substances in its surroundings. We typically have a primary producer which starts the food chain by using the energy to create their own organic compounds. Additionally, we have consumers, also known as heterotrophs. These are organisms that feed on plants or other animals in order to gain energy. There are primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary consumers. The primary consumer feeds on the producer, the secondary consumer feeds on the primary consumer, the tertiary consumer feeds on the secondary consumer, and the quaternary consumer will eat the tertiary consumer. We then have a decomposer at the end of the food chain, which is responsible for breaking dead or decaying organisms. Now pause the video and answer the following question.
Plants get their energy from the sun. This is done through the process of photosynthesis. Once the plants have their energy from the sun, other organisms are able to feed on them. We can now look back at the food chain we have created and identify each type of producer, consumer, and decomposer. First, let's find the primary producer. We know that the grass will be the primary producer or autotroph because it is at the beginning of the food chain and uses sunlight to create its own food. Now we can identify the primary consumer. The primary consumer will be the second step in the food chain and eats the producer, which means that it is the primary consumer. This would be the grasshopper in our food chain. Now let's identify the secondary consumer. This will be the third step in the food chain and the organism that eats the primary consumer. This means that it is the frog in our food chain. Next, we can identify the tertiary consumer. This will be the fourth step in the food chain and the organism that feeds on the secondary consumer, so it is the python. Next, we can identify the quaternary consumer. Having this many organisms in a food chain is not so typical, but this consumer will be the fifth step in the food chain and will eat the tertiary consumer, so it is the eagle. Lastly, we can identify the decomposer. The decomposer is the last step in the food chain, and in this case, it'll be the fungi.
Now pause the video and answer the following question.
A few other decomposers you could have came up with are bacteria, snails, insects, and there are definitely more. These are decomposers because they will feed on dead organisms and break them down.
Now that we know how to create a food chain and identify organisms as producers, consumers, or decomposers, we can create an energy pyramid to show the flow of energy from one organism to the next. In an energy pyramid, energy flows from the bottom to the top, from the producers to the top consumers. Each organism has its own trophic level, which is given by the number of steps the organism is away from the beginning of the food chain. Knowing this, we can create an energy pyramid with the food chain we have created. The bottom will be the producer, which is grass, and the top will be the final consumer, which is an eagle. We do not include the decomposer in the energy pyramid because they can consume dead matter in any step of the food chain. We can now give each organism a trophic level. Grass would be 1, grasshopper would be 2, frog would be 3, python would be 4, and eagle would be 5.
We know that energy is transferred from each organism to the next, but there is a rule to figure out how much energy is actually transferred. This rule is called the 10% rule. It says that when energy is passed in an ecosystem from one trophic level to the next, only 10% of the energy will be passed on. The other 90% will be lost mainly to heat. If we come up with numbers and say that the grass begins with 100,000 kilograms of energy, the next level will have 10% of that, which is 10,000, and so on. We end up with the last trophic level only having 10 kilograms of energy due to this 10% rule.
Now pause the video and answer the following question.
The answer is true. If one thing dies off in a food chain, then every other organism in that food chain will be affected. For example, in the food chain we looked at in this video, if the frogs died off, then the pythons would also die off because they would not have any more frogs to eat, which was their food source.
Thanks for watching our video today.
We hope this was helpful and that you're a pro with food chains and energy pyramids now.